back from the dead. I wish YouTube would let you use the music, because I would definitely add literally the intro of Back from the Dead by Hailstorm. Anyway, just imagine it. But yeah, I'm back with another video. So technically there was another video that I already filmed that was supposed to go up before this one, my October wrap-up. However, basically I've had a hard time finding a way to transfer my videos from my phone to my laptop, and yeah, so unfortunately I haven't been able to edit that video. I don't even know if it's gonna go up at this point. Like, I've already filmed like 3 videos, including that one, I think, that I wasn't able to transfer to my laptop, and so I've never uploaded. But yeah, so hopefully I will find a way, but it's looking kind of impossible right now. But yeah, so this video is probably gonna go up before that one, but this is my TBR for the end of the year, or like all the books that I would ideally want to read before the end of the year. So yeah, I'm just gonna get straight into it. It's a bit of a silly video for me to make, in the sense that I always have such long lists of books that I want to read before the end of the year, and then I probably like read not even half of them. But you know what, whatever, I'm just gonna do it. And it might be a fun idea to actually eventually, like maybe in January, do a video reacting to this video and kind of see, did I manage to read all these books? But yeah, so anyway, I'm just gonna start off completely randomly. I don't have like a list, which honestly, probably a big mistake. I should have probably made a list, but whatever, we're going with it. So number 1, just because it's in front of me, Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor. So I think this is actually one of my top 23 books to read this year, and actually I will be going through those books because those are like probably my top priority. And yeah, this is one of them. But honestly, even if it wasn't part of that list, I would want to read it, because I've been wanting to read this book for a few years now, and I recently read her other book that was translated into English, Paradise, and I really liked it. But basically from all the reviews I've seen, people kind of unanimously mention how they preferred this book over that one. So I'm really curious, because this one, like, I can't remember the rating online, but like I feel like the people who enjoyed it really enjoyed it. And personally, I did really like the writing style in Paradise, and so I feel like the writing style, which is amazing, plus I don't want to say like a better story, but like, again, a lot of the reviews were saying like the horror elements and the magical realism elements were just better in this one. So like, yeah, like those two combined, I'm just really excited to read it. And I feel like it's gonna be a 5-star, but honestly, recently a lot of the books that I thought were gonna be 5-star reads have turned out to be like not 5-star reads, and in some cases even like 3, if not lower, like 3 stars or lower. So I'm kind of scared now, but again, like I've been wanting to read it for years, and I feel like I am gonna like it. And I think at the very least it's probably gonna be a 4-star. Like I just know it, because I gave 4 stars to Paradise, and if this one is, you know, supposed to be better, then I don't see why I wouldn't. So yeah, Hurricane Season, it's about this woman who dies mysteriously in this small village, and everybody calls her a witch in this village, and I don't know if she actually is a witch or not, and I think that's probably part of the story maybe. But basically the whole village is like questioning what happened and like who killed her, stuff like that. Oh yeah, okay, it mentions here on the back that there's a lot of like unreliable narrators, which was the case for Paradise as well, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that element of the book, so I feel like it's gonna be great in this one as well. And yeah, so it mentions here, Melchor extracts some tiny shred of humanity from these characters and creates a swirling portrait of a damned Mexican village. Yeah, I don't know, I just trust Fernanda Melchor, because again, she did a really fantastic job with Paradise, and I just feel like this might even be better. I don't know. So yeah, that's one book. And then actually let me go through my top 23 books of 2023. The ones that I haven't read yet are The Pisces by Melissa Broder. And I've already mentioned this in a previous video, I'm pretty sure, but I have read Milk Fed, also by Melissa Broder, and loved it, gave it 5 stars. So again, I feel like the same is gonna be true for the Pisces. And the Pisces is about this woman who falls in love with a merman. And yeah, supposedly it's like super weird, which I think all of her books are. And yeah, I don't know much more than that, and honestly I don't want to know much more than that. I just trust that I'm gonna love it. But yeah, and she's also coming out with a new book this year. I think actually it already came out in October, Death Valley, and that's another one that I would ideally like to read before the end of the year, but honestly I actually wouldn't mind reading it next year. That was also one of my anticipated releases of the year. So yeah, I don't know, every year I make a list of like my anticipated releases coming out, you know, each year, but I never actually read them, or like I'll only read like a few and then I completely forget about all the other ones. So yeah, I don't know. Death Valley is definitely one that I was looking forward to, and like I kept, you know, remembering about it. So again, like ideally I would read it this year, but at the same time I feel like there's books that have been on my TBR for longer, and so I'm kind of, I don't know, I usually prioritize older books, so yeah, I might probably end up reading that next year, but who knows. But the Pisces I definitely want to read this year, so that's one. And then Severance by Ling Ma is another one. I bought the book last year, and last year I also bought her other book, which was a short story collection. I forget the name, but I'll put up the picture. But that one I loved. I gave it 5 stars. So again, I feel like this is also gonna be 5 stars. I think from what I remember, it's like satire. It's meant to be like making fun of like the usual trope of like the end of the world apocalypse or like a zombie apocalypse, but also it's making fun and like poking fun at work culture, and how, you know, most workers are treated like slaves, at least in the US, because it's probably a bit different in other countries, but yeah, in a lot of countries, like there's definitely a lot of people that can relate to that. So yeah, that's an interesting book, and I think I'm gonna love it just because I love the writing style of the short story collection. Okay, another book that I've been wanting to read for these past 2 years is Acts of Desperation by Meg Nolan. And this is one of those like sad girl books. It's just right up my alley. It's about this young woman who I think is depressed, or like she's going through some sort of like mental crisis, and she falls in love with this man, but this man doesn't really reciprocate her feelings, or like they got together but then he breaks up with her or something. And she becomes like super obsessed with him, and she's trying to like, I can't remember if it's like either getting back together with him or she just wants to, you know, be with him, but he's not interested. And so it's basically like about that. And yeah, I think she kind of like loses her mind a bit, but yeah, it sounds interesting. Again, like these are all my like 5-star predictions. And then another one from my top 23 is I Used to Be Charming by Eve Babbitt. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, you've probably heard me mention Eve Babbitt. She's definitely one of my favorite authors. I loved all of her books. Again, I'm hoping it's gonna be a 5-star. We'll see how it goes. And then on a similar note, we have The White Album by Joan Didion. And by on a similar note, I just mean that they were 2 authors that were often being compared because they both wrote about like California life, and like in the 60s and 70s, I think. So yeah, they were often being compared to their writing style and stuff like that, but like, yeah, this is different from I Used to Be Charming. But The White Album by Joan Didion is a collection of stories, I think, if I remember correctly. And I'm pretty sure it's non-fiction, or maybe it's kind of like Eve Babbitt's where it's fictionalized autobiography. But yeah, it's about, I think it mostly focuses on San Francisco though. From what I remember, Joan Didion mostly wrote about San Francisco, but I might be wrong. But yeah, it's about her own experiences, like I said, LA slash San Francisco, but like generally speaking California in the 60s. And yeah, she was like a very well-known author even at the time, and she was married to a famous author as well, so like they knew a lot of like famous people and stuff like that. So like both her and Eve Babbitt had like really interesting lives. And yeah, I've been really wanting to read Joan Didion because so far I've only read one book of hers, and it's one of those books that like she wrote later on in her career. What was it called? Oh yeah, The Year of Magical Thinking. That's the one I wrote. I wish. That's the one I read. And honestly, like, it wasn't my favorite, but also like it's such a personal book, and I don't know. Yeah, like I feel like her other stuff from like her younger years is more up my alley. But yeah, so The White Album is one of them. And then actually, speaking of Joan Didion, a book that I bought this year also by Joan Didion is Slouching Towards Bethlehem, and that's another one that I would ideally like to read this year, just because I bought it. And every time I buy books, I always hope, like I'm always hoping that I'm gonna read them pretty soon and like, you know, not wait years. But yeah, so like ideally I would like to read it also this year, but again, I think I have a lot more books that I prioritize more. So but yeah, and then another one is Coent Tree by Rachel Cusk. This is a collection of essays. Rachel Cusk is another one of my favorite authors, hence why it's on my top 23 of 2023. So yeah, I bought this like a few years ago. I think by now it's been like 4 or 5 years or something. And I still haven't read it, so that's a crime. But yeah, it's a collection of essays. I honestly can't even remember like what the topics are of the essays, if there's only like one topic or if it's like multiple topics per essay. I don't know. Or sorry, like different topics per essay. But yeah, I just know that I love Rachel Cusk's writing, and I feel like she has like really important messages in her books. Like she discusses a lot of important topics or just interesting topics, so I'm really curious to read her nonfiction, which I have read her autobiography, or like one of her memoirs. What was it called again? I don't know. Again, I'll put a picture up. I do own that book as well, and that one's also one of my favorites, even though it's a memoir, which is kind of weird. I don't know, I feel like it's weird to say like one of my favorite books is a memoir, but like it's such a good book. And then another book that I haven't read yet is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey, oh god, what's his last name? Eugenides? Something like that. I feel like I don't really need to talk about this book in a sense that most people have probably heard about it or like watched the movie. I watched the movie years ago. I think I was in high school, and I definitely want to rewatch it because I haven't watched it since, but I really liked it. And yeah, I'm just really curious to see how the book will fare compared to the movie, because I remember hearing that like, you know, some people preferred the movie, some people prefer the book, some people just like both. But yeah, I'm just curious. But generally speaking, the book is about, basically it's written from the perspective of a group of boys who have been idolizing this group of sisters for like, I don't know, years. And this group of sisters, they are like the image of like the typical American, all-American family, if you will. Like they're blondes, blue eyes, I think, you know, white. But they come from a very religious household. Like their parents are super strict, and because of that they obviously suffer. And basically the book is about how they all end up taking their own lives, but it's written from the perspective of the boys, so there's also that level of like romanticization of who they were as individuals, and also like what they ended up doing, I think. And also just in general, like the way, and this was kind of true in the movie as well, but like it's, especially from what I hear, especially apparent from the book, like they're not necessarily reliable narrators, in the sense that they talk about them as though they were like, they basically put them on pedestals, right? So they talk about them as though they weren't like people like you and me, right? They had no flaws, like none of that, right? So again, this is where a lot of the controversy comes in. But yeah, I'm just really curious about it, and it sounds like a book that I would enjoy. Okay, then another book is Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. I forget the author, by Jeanette Winterson. Okay, so this is, I think, also a memoir, or again, like fictionalized autobiography, but it's basically about the author when she was younger, I think, realizing that she's a lesbian. I'm pretty sure she's a lesbian. She might be bisexual, but I think she's lesbian. And yeah, it's about her coming to terms with that, understanding that, yeah. And I heard about this book years ago. I don't know, I think it was on Tumblr. Like, I came across some quotes from the book and I loved it, and so the moment I saw that, I was like, okay, I need to read that book. So yeah, I think that's how I came to hear about it. And yeah, I've been wanting to read it for a few years and I haven't yet, so again, especially now that I put it as my top 23 of 2023, like, I need to read it this year. And then I also have Feminist Theory by Bell Hooks on my list. I have read several Bell Hooks books by now, but yeah, the one book that I chose as my top 23 I haven't read though, so honestly I always do. Like, I don't know why I even make top 23 books, or like a list of like my top books to read each year, because I don't know, every single time I end up reading other books instead. And specifically when I'm interested in an author and I end up choosing a book, I always end up reading other books first. Like, it happened with Fernanda Melchor, it happened with Melissa Broder, it happened with Joan Didion. Like, I don't know why I do that, but yeah. So yeah, Feminist Theory, as the name suggests, is about feminism. It is a nonfiction, obviously. Honestly, I remember when I was making this list, I was actually choosing between like this book, Feminist Theory, or Feminism is for Everybody. And then ultimately I was like, you know what, let's just go with Feminist Theory. And guess what? I read Feminism is for Everybody, like, I think at the beginning of the year. But I haven't read Feminist Theory yet. I don't know, my brain, it's a magical place. But yeah, it's about feminism. Specifically, I think it focuses on the US, because Bell Hooks was American. Wait a goddamn minute. It's always so awkward when you're not sure whether an author is still alive or not, and you're like, should I use the past tense? Oh, should I? 2021. Okay. She was American, so obviously I think it's more focused on the US, but I think in general, and I feel this about all the books of hers that I've read so far, there's always something that you can learn, and there's always something that you can apply even to like other countries and stuff like that. So I think feminist books in general, even when they're not the most inclusive, there's still something you can learn from them for the most part. So that's another one. And then Terminal Boredom by Izuki Suzuki. Oh my god, this is why I should have written a list. Izumi Suzuki, I was close. Yeah, this is a collection of stories, and I think it's kind of like sci-fi, dystopian, but also it's like genre defying. So yeah, usually I'm not super into sci-fi, but I heard great things about this book specifically, and like her and her life. I've already talked about it in my top 23 of 2023 video. But yeah, so I still haven't read it. I do own the physical copy, and that's why I haven't read it yet, because I wanted to read the physical copy. So my plan is to read it in December. So hopefully I will actually get to read it. Again, I can't remember exactly what the topic of the book is about, but I know that it is kind of like a feminist book. Izumi Suzuki had a really tough life, and I think she was really kind of fed up with Japanese society and like the way women were treated and stuff like that. So I think it's like related to that, if I remember correctly. So it sounds like super interesting. And then another book that was not only on this list but also one of my anticipated releases of the year is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I am planning to read it this month in November, so hopefully I'll actually do that. I do have the audiobook from Scribd. Well, now it's no longer Scribd, it's Everend. But yeah, I watched Cindy's review of the book and now I'm kind of like, ooh, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about it, but I still want to read it because I do consider Rebecca Kuang one of my favorite authors. I loved the Poppy War series and I loved Babel, so yeah, I'm curious to see how she's gonna do with the mystery genre. But again, like after watching Cindy's review, I'm just like, I don't know, there's kind of like a bad taste in my mouth. But also I'm not gonna let that deter me from reading it and making up my own opinion on it. But yeah, that's just Yellowface. And in case you don't know, Yellowface is about this white author who basically ends up pretending to be an Asian author because she finds the manuscript of her frenemy who was an Asian author, and she passed away. And basically, like, she was on, I was gonna say the scene of the crime, but like, I think it was a natural death. But basically, because she's there at her house, she finds this manuscript of this unpublished novel she was working on, and she reads it and she thinks it's amazing, and she kind of like lies to herself, or I don't know if you want to call it a lie, but like she basically says to herself, well, it would be a shame to not publish this book. But instead of letting, you know, her dead friend's publisher, for example, instead of letting them, you know, publish it posthumously, instead she decides to take it as her own, and she hands it in to her own publisher and basically says, yeah, I wrote it, but it's like, it's slightly different from what I've written before, but it's my book. So basically they end up kind of like, I think they want her to publish it under a different name, and they make that name sound like ethnically ambiguous, so that it would sell more, I guess, and it would come across as more authentic. So yeah, it's basically commentary on the publishing industry and also, you know, authors of color and versus white authors, and like feelings of entitlement of like, you know, why can I not be famous when, you know, other authors of color are becoming famous just because of, you know, the fact that they're minorities and stuff like that. So it's like commentary on that. But I highly suggest watching Cindy's video on this if you haven't watched it, because honestly, like, she raised and made like really good points. And also just in terms of like R.F. Kuang's own motive for writing it, after watching her video I realized like it might be a bit different from what I thought it was originally. So yeah, I don't know, I highly suggest watching that video. And then another one of the books that I want to read before the end of the year is Double Blind by Edward St. Aubin. This book is about, oh god, I can't even remember exactly, but it's about like two friends, and I think one of them is dating this guy, and I think they go on some sort of like road trip. I can't remember. And basically it's one of those books that, like, from what I remember, it's not really plot oriented, it's more about the characters themselves and them just like discussing, you know, life and all of that. But yeah, I feel like I haven't heard that many people talk about this book, and personally I haven't heard of this author prior to this book. It was actually an impulse buy for me 2 years ago, last year. I just saw it in a bookstore. It was like a new release, and the cover was so beautiful. But yeah, the cover was so beautiful that I was like, oh. And so, you know, I saw the cover, I read the synopsis, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get it. And I haven't read it yet, so I needed, honestly I put it on this list because I needed a motive to read it. Like, I needed something to like motivate me, actually I should say. So I needed a reason to motivate me to read it. So yeah, again, because I do own the physical copy, I'm planning on reading it in December when I'm back home. Hopefully I'll have enough time, I honestly don't know. But yeah. And then on a similar note, I really want to read I Had That Same Dream Again by Yoru Sumino, I think is her name. This is a light novel, and again, I own the physical book, so I want to read it when I'm back home in December. But it's about this young girl who, I think, like, as a school project, she needs to, I don't know if it's a school project or like she decides to talk to basically other women that she just kind of randomly encounters, and they're all different ages, right? And I think the whole point of the book is that, like, it shows you like the different struggles that women face at different ages. So her, like, she's like, I think a middle school aged kid or maybe elementary school, and then she meets like a high schooler, and then she meets like young adult woman. I mean, young adult sounds like she's a teenager, but like a woman in her like 20s, I think, or 30s, and then she meets like an older woman. And it's basically just like her talking to all these women, and I think it's mostly about like, again, the issues women face. So it is, I think, like heavy, like it discusses heavy topics, but it's also written from the perspective of like this younger girl, so it's also like more accessible, I think. And that makes all of the books from my top 23 books of 2023 that I haven't read yet. So yeah, those are the books that are like my main priority. Other than that, I want to go through some of my anticipated releases from this year, because there were some of them that like I was really looking forward to, and so ideally I would like to read them this year. One of them is Big Swiss by Jan Biagin, and again, this is one of those books that I've actually, since buying it, I've heard some negative reviews about it, and specifically I remember Jessie on BookTube, they talked about how it's kind of, I think, transphobic, if I remember correctly. I haven't actually watched the video yet because I didn't want to be spoiled, and I wanted to read the book first, but I haven't read the book yet. But I'm definitely planning on watching that video. But yeah, they talked about how it's kind of transphobic, and I've also read other reviews, I think it was on Goodreads, that were saying like, yeah, there were just some elements of the book that were not that great. So now I'm kind of like, ooh, shit. Kind of wish I'd known that before I bought the book, but you know, too late. I'm still planning to read it, obviously, and just like Yellowface, I want to read it and make up my own mind about it and see where I stand on that. This is about this woman, Greta. She basically transcribes therapy sessions for this therapist who is a sex coach. And I think he wants to write a book based on his own experience being a sex coach. So basically he's having her transcribe all of his sessions. And of course the names of the patients are all anonymous technically. However, because they live in a small town, she kind of recognizes everybody pretty much. So she knows about everybody's business. She's privy to everybody's secrets, I guess, when it comes to their sex lives at least. And basically she, when listening to these tapes, there's a woman in particular that she becomes kind of obsessed with, or like she's really interested in this woman that she calls Big Swiss, and eventually she runs into her randomly and lies to her. Like, she recognizes her voice, she makes up her own, like, her whole identity, or at the very least she lies about her job. But basically they become, I think they become lovers, but at the very least they start, you know, being part of each other's lives. And then of course eventually I think the truth will come out that she knows about you know, Big Swiss's own personal life. Also, I think Big Swiss is married, so yeah, there might be cheating involved as well. So yeah, I don't know, it's a messy story. Like, it's already a messy kind of setting, but yeah, it just sounds really interesting. But again, I'm kind of nervous about the transphobic stuff that might be in the book. And then another one that was one of my anticipated releases is Tom Lake by Anne Patchett. And I've read one Anne Patchett book before, and that is The Dutch House, and I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. So this is a big book, but I'm planning on reading it this month in November. So we'll see if I actually get to it, but ideally I will. This is about this woman who used to work at a theater called Tom Lake, and she's basically retelling some of her stories from her youth working at Tom Lake to her 2 daughters. So I think that's what the story is about. And I don't know if we also get like I don't know if it's dual timeline, and we also get like the daughter's perspectives. But yeah, it's a novel about family, love, and growing up. It's a meditation on youthful love, married love, and the lives our parents led before they were our parents. I don't know, it sounds interesting. And The Dutch House was also a novel that was like focused on like a family and like different family dynamics and like family drama. and it was really interesting, so I think I'm gonna love this one as well, especially because this one is more centered on like women specifically, so sounds even more up my alley than the Dutch House. And then this was not actually an anticipated release, but I own the physical copy, so I'm gonna talk about it now. If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. I heard about this from a bookstagrammer, I forget her name, but I'll put up like a screenshot of the post if I can find it. But I heard this is a great book, and this bookstagrammer, I love her recommendations, and this was one of them, so I was like, okay, definitely gonna pick it up. Also, I think she included some like quotes from the book in her post, if I remember correctly, and like they just sounded great. And it's not a big book at all, so I feel like, you know, I could read it this year. But yeah, I'm really curious about it, and it sounds so good, so I just really want to get to it. So again, ideally I'll read it this year. Honestly, logistically, I don't even know when that would be. Maybe beginning of December, but yeah, I don't know. Another book that this was one of my anticipated releases is DCAT by Jenny Fran Davis. Again, I don't know logistically if and when I would read it, but I really want to get to it. I cannot remember what the story is about, but I feel like the title kind of says enough. I remember it involves a bird. I don't know, like a bird is also like on the cover, but I can't remember how the bird comes into play. I don't know if it's like magical realism or yeah, I can't remember anything about this book, but I remember the cover, and the cover is so beautiful, and I just really want to read it. So that's that. On a similar note, another book that I keep thinking about that I don't know much about is Peach Pit, and I think it's a collection of stories by different authors, and again, I think it's like feminism and like women-centric, but also very inclusive from what I remember. So yeah, that's another one that I'm definitely gonna get like a physical copy of, but I'll probably end up reading it next year, realistically. I don't know if I'll be able to get to it this year. Is there anything else? Oh, actually there are. Another book that I want to read, and again, I think I'll read it in November, is Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. And I recently read The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. I talked about it in my October wrap-up, but I doubt I'm gonna upload that video, so you don't actually know my thoughts on that, but I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It was so good. Like, I think one of my favorites of the year. And so I'm really curious to read her other novel, which is Vampires of El Norte, and it sounds perfect for like spooky season. Obviously it's no longer technically spooky season, but to me, November like is very much still like a gothic month. Like, I love reading gothic literature in November, so even though there's vampires, so obviously there is that horror element, it's still, I'm pretty sure the setting is very gothic, so I'm really excited to read it, and I think I'll definitely get to it. I have the audiobook also from Severance, I think, so yeah, or from my library, I can't remember, either or. I would also like to read more Ava Reid books, because I recently read The Wolf and the Woodsman. I actually read it in in November, so like this month, and I really liked it, and I feel like that was her debut novel, so I feel like her most recent books might even be better. I remember, what was it, Juniper and Thorn is one of them that I want to read, and then she came out with a YA this year, and I think it's called A Study in Drowning. So I don't know how much I would like it because it's YA, however I would still want to read it because it's Ava Reid, and I don't know, I feel like she might become one of my favorite authors. Maybe we'll see how it goes with like Juniper and Thorn, and I feel like there was another one, I can't remember what it's called though, but anyway, yeah, I really want to read more Ava Reid. Okay, another book that I really want to read, and again, I'm planning on reading it in November, but we'll see. It's A Far Wilder Magic by Alison Saft, and I can't remember who it was, but I remember someone mentioning, I think it was a booktuber mentioning how it reminded them of basically the dynamic between Roy and Lisa. Is that her name? Liza or Risa? whatever, from Full Metal Alchemist. I love them, even though I can't remember her name, but I do love them, and I'm just really excited to read it. And I do have a copy from my library, so I should get to it. I have the ebook, but it's on my laptop, so I feel like that's the reason why I have been procrastinating reading it, because I got it like from my library. I got it like in October, and then it expired, so I got it again this month. But it's like I just keep procrastinating it, and it's, I don't know, I don't like reading from my laptop. But I found it on Hoopla, and for some reason I can't have Hoopla on my phone, so I have to read it on my laptop. But I will, because it's about a chemist and the daughter of a famous chemist. Alchemist. It's about this alchemist, and he wants to be tutored by this woman's mom. But basically her mother, I don't know if she goes on a trip or if she goes missing, but basically she's not there. And the woman, I don't know her name, but she is not an alchemist. I think she wanted to be, but like she just can't, like she doesn't have the ability to be, I guess. But she wants to perform this spell that can only be performed like in a very specific point in time, and it's coming up, like that day is coming up. And so she needs his help to do it because she's not an alchemist. And in return, if he helps her, she will let him study from her mother's notes, like from her books and stuff like that. So basically they come up with this deal, and it's also like obviously a romance, and they fall in love. And I think it's a slow burn maybe, but yeah. So, and it is like obviously a fantasy setting and everything. So it just sounds so good. And again, because of that one comment, I don't know if it actually might have been on Goodreads, I don't know, but I remember someone mentioning, you know, the parallels with Full Metal Alchemist, and so I was like, okay, I'll read it. You know, if I wasn't interested before, that one did it for me. So yeah, so definitely want to read it before the end of the year because I have to. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know, I can't really think of any. I swear to God, I feel like the moment I'm gonna stop filming, I'm probably gonna be like, oh, I didn't talk about that book. But yeah, right now I can't really think of any more books that are like on my priority list where I'm like, I really want to read it. So yeah, I'm just gonna end it here, I guess. But yeah, we'll see if I get to read any or all of these, and hopefully I will. But yeah, I'll see you in another video, maybe. Bye.